25 American soldiers climbed toward a German stronghold in Italy. By the time the order came to pull back, about two-thirds were dead or wounded, and the reinforcements they expected had never arrived. Their one black officer could have gone down with the first group. Instead, he stayed behind with the badly wounded. Earlier that morning, a German grenade had landed near him and failed to explode. Seconds later, he was moving toward the man who threw it, and then into a hidden dugout alone. His name was Vernon Baker. The fight on that hill would last 12 hours, and the choice he made during the retreat would take the United States Army 52 years to honor fully. The attack began before dawn on April 5, 1945. Baker moved at the front of a weapons platoon, while 3 rifle platoons followed the same mountain route. Their target was Castle Aghinolfi, a stone strongpoint above the coastal highway in northern Italy. German observers on the high ground could see the approaches and direct fire down the slope. Other American attempts to take the position had already failed. Baker and roughly 25 men advanced faster than the rest of the company. Within 2 hours, they reached the south side of a draw only about 250 yards from the castle. They were close enough to threaten the defenses, but too far ahead to count on quick help if the hill opened fire. Baker searched for a place to set up a machine gun. 2 short cylinders caught his eye at the edge of the hillside. They looked like pieces of pipe rising from the earth, but they were viewing tubes for a hidden German observation post. The men inside could watch the Americans without showing their heads. Baker crawled toward the opening from below, keeping the ground between him and the slit. He pushed his rifle into the narrow space and fired the full clip. The 2 observers inside were killed. The gunfire aimed down the slope had just lost a set of eyes. Baker did not wait to see whether anyone had noticed. He moved again, because every second in front of a hidden position gave the next German weapon time to find him. Nearby, Baker found a camouflaged machine gun nest. Its 2-man crew was eating breakfast. He shot both soldiers before they could bring the weapon around. Then Captain John Runyon, the company commander, reached Baker's small group. A German soldier appeared from the draw and threw a grenade toward them. The Americans had almost no time to react, but the grenade did not explode. Baker fired twice as the man tried to escape. The dud had given him a few seconds that should not have existed. It also revealed that more Germans were concealed below. Baker could have remained above the draw and waited. Instead, he went down into it alone, toward a position he could not yet see clearly. At the bottom, Baker found the hidden entrance to a dugout. He used a grenade to blast it open. A German soldier came out and Baker shot him. Baker threw another grenade inside, then entered with his submachine gun firing. 2 more defenders were killed. In a short stretch of ground, he had removed an observation post, a machine gun nest, and a protected shelter. But the success created a dangerous illusion. Each cleared position pulled the group farther into the German defensive system. The castle remained above them. The rest of the company had not closed the gap. Mortars and machine guns were beginning to answer. Baker had opened a path, yet the 25 men with him were becoming a small island on the slope. Baker had not entered the army as a celebrated soldier. He joined in 1941 because he needed work. One recruiter first told him there was no place for a black applicant. Baker tried again and was accepted. He wanted a supply job, but the army sent him to the infantry. He rose from enlisted man to officer in the all-black 370th Infantry Regiment of the 92nd Infantry Division. In that segregated army, black soldiers fought while being denied equal respect and opportunity. By the spring of 1945, Baker was the only black officer in his company. On the hill, no policy paper could clear a gun slit. The men near him needed decisions made under fire. He had already learned what hidden German positions could do. Months earlier, during another attack in Italy, 2 men with him were killed by machine gun fire. Baker was wounded in the arm and spent 2 months in a hospital. He returned to his unit after Christmas and resumed leading men through the same kind of steep country. That experience did not make him fearless. It taught him how quickly a concealed weapon could cut apart a group before anyone understood where the rounds were coming from. Now, below Castle Aghinolfi, the warning became real again. German mortars began dropping among the Americans. Machine gun fire crossed the draw. Men who had climbed beside Baker only minutes earlier started falling. The position changed from assault to survival. Baker's group had reached the south side of the draw, but the company behind it could not provide the needed support. The Germans still held high ground and could fire into movement below. The Americans waited for reinforcements. None arrived. Every delay gave the defenders a better picture of the exposed group. A mortar round could wound a man with fragments and stone. A hidden gun could close the only usable path. Baker moved between positions, kept the survivors organized, and watched the number of men able to fight shrink. The attack had not stopped by choice. It was being broken apart one casualty at a time. By the time the fire reached its worst point, about 2/3 of the 25 men were dead or wounded. Some could still walk. Others could not move without help. The small group had lost the strength needed to continue toward the castle, yet staying in place would only give the German mortars more time. Captain Runyon ordered a withdrawal in 2 groups. The first group would include the walking wounded. The more seriously wounded men would have to wait until others could carry or guide them. A withdrawal under fire is not simply movement in the opposite direction. Someone must keep the enemy's heads down while the line turns away. Someone must be last. Baker volunteered to cover the first group and then remain for the men who could not leave quickly. That decision narrowed his choices. If the first group moved too slowly, the Germans could follow their path with machine gun fire. If Baker left too soon, the wounded still waiting would be exposed. If he stayed too long, the second group could be trapped with him. The castle was still above. The draw was still full of concealed approaches. Baker had already spent hours moving toward danger. Now he had to face the same defenses while his own men moved away from him. The easiest story would turn this into a moment without fear. The real act was harder. Baker understood the weapons, knew what had happened to most of the group, and stayed anyway. Courage did not remove the danger. It made him accept a larger share of it. If you want more human stories told this clearly, subscribe to Frontline Brief like this video, and tell us in the comments what you think mattered most on that hill. The attack, the retreat, or the decision to stay. Baker's choice is the center of the story because it changed what the remaining men could do. The first group began moving down with the walking wounded. Baker and the men still able to fire covered them. The aim was not to win the castle in that moment. It was to keep German attention on the few Americans who remained while the others crossed exposed ground. Each yard gained by the wounded increased the distance Baker would later have to travel under the same guns. When the first group reached safer ground, Baker did not follow. He stayed to help the more seriously wounded and prepare the second withdrawal. The men had to be lifted, supported, or carried while fire continued around the draw. The survivors could not move as one clean line. They had to use folds in the earth and brief pauses between bursts. Baker watched the upper slope, then the route below, trying to protect both at once. This was the part of combat that medals often compress into a phrase. A wounded man is not an idea. He has weight, pain, fear, and a body that may not cooperate. Getting him off a mountain requires time, and time was exactly what the German positions were trying to take away. During the second withdrawal, Baker found 2 machine gun posts that the assault had passed earlier. They now threatened the retreat from the side and rear. One of Baker's men gave covering fire while Baker moved close enough to use hand grenades. He destroyed both positions. The action did more than add 2 weapons to account. Those guns could have fired into men carrying the seriously wounded and unable to scatter. Baker then continued down with the remaining group. By the end of the withdrawal, he had been credited with killing 9 German soldiers and eliminating 3 machine gun positions, 1 observation post, and 1 dugout. The castle had not been taken, but the survivors had a path off the hill because the last guns were silenced long enough for them to move. The first day's result was not victory. The attack had neared the strongpoint, damaged its defenses, and collapsed under heavy fire without reinforcements. Most of the men who had climbed with Baker were casualties. There was no clean ending when the last group reached the American line. The wounded still needed treatment. The surviving men had to explain where positions were hidden and how the rout had failed. Baker had spent 12 hours in combat, close enough to see individual enemies and wounded friends. He could finally leave the slope, but the army was already considering another advance toward the same objective. That night, Baker volunteered to go back. He led another force toward the castle through minefields and heavy fire. Darkness hid the men from some German observers, but it also hid the ground beneath their boots. The route could not be treated as new. Every bend held the memory of the previous day's guns, and every delay risked another mortar response. Baker knew where the observation post had been, where the dugout opened, and where the machine gun positions had covered the draw. He also knew what the hill had cost. Returning was not a repeat of the morning. It was a decision made after the danger had proved itself. He led the advance because his experience could help other men survive the approach. When the force reached the strongpoint, the Germans had abandoned it. The castle and the high ground were secured without another version of the first day's slaughter. That outcome can sound almost empty after so much action, but it was the final turn of the battle. Baker's attack had exposed and damaged the defenses. His retreat had saved men who otherwise might have been cut off. His return helped guide a new advance through the ground that had stopped the company before. He had not captured the castle alone, and the men who fell must not disappear behind one name. His achievement was more human and more exact. He kept acting when the plan failed, the group broke, help did not come, and wounded soldiers needed someone to remain between them and the enemy. The Army awarded Baker the Distinguished Service Cross in July 1945. It was a high honor, but not the Medal of Honor. No Black American received that highest award for service in the Second World War at the time. Decades later, a review examined whether racial discrimination had shaped those decisions. The answer led to 7 Black veterans being recommended for the Medal of Honor. By then, 6 had died. Vernon Baker was the only one still alive. On January 13, 1997, President Bill Clinton placed the medal around his neck at the White House. 52 years had passed since the Hill in Italy. The ceremony corrected part of the official record, but it could not return the men who had never lived to see that correction. Baker stood at the ceremony as an old man and wiped away tears. The image matters because it joins 2 times that the Army had kept apart. In one, a young officer remained on a mountain with wounded soldiers while German guns watched the rout below. In the other, the same man stood in a formal room while the country finally named the full meaning of what he had done. The medal did not create the courage. It acknowledged a decision already witnessed by the men who came down the hill. Baker later said that the men who served with him were part of the honor. That is the right scale for the story. One officer made crucial choices, but every casualty, every covering burst, and every carried wounded man shaped the result. Baker continued serving after the war, including during the Korean War. He lived to see a country slowly change the way it remembered Black service members. He died in 2010 at 90 and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Those facts close a life, but they are not why this story endures. The lasting part happened in a smaller space. A hidden observation slit, a grenade that did not explode, a dugout, a draw under mortar fire, and 2 groups moving wounded men downhill. Baker could not control whether help arrived or the attack succeeded. He could control whether he left before the most vulnerable men did. 25 men started toward the castle. About 2/3 were killed or wounded. The reinforcements did not come. The order changed from advance to retreat, and Vernon Baker changed with it. He stopped fighting for ground and began fighting for time for walking wounded to move, time for others to carry the badly hurt, and time to silence the guns covering the rout. Then, after surviving the withdrawal, he led men back up the same hill. The nation waited 52 years to place its highest medal around his neck. The men coming down the mountain did not need 52 years to understand what they had seen. Their officer had stayed behind, not because the battle was going well, but because it had gone terribly wrong and they still needed him.